He's just not a fair person. He's very greedy when it comes down to money.
It started with a whisper. Christine didn't shout it, didn't post some fiery quote across Instagram stories, or flash any receipts on camera. She just spoke slowly and softly into a studio microphone, and what she said sent a chill straight through fans who followed this family for more than a decade. In the early pages of her soon-to-be best-selling memoir, Christine Brown allegedly names a figure who received consistent payments during the final years of Sister Wives, and no, it wasn't a child, a grandchild, or even one of the wives. It was Kody's personal trainer, a man the wives allegedly never approved, never met, and never budgeted for. Wellness expenses, Christine calls them, tucked into the family's shared TLC stipend like nothing was amiss. But when she looked closer, the numbers didn't just raise eyebrows, they raised alarms. Now we've known for a while that Kody's obsession with self-image runs deep. The spray tan booths, the flexing in confessionals, the bandanas that come and go like weather patterns. But Christine's tone in these early pages isn't mocking, it's stunned. She recalls the moment she realized money meant for groceries, bills, and shared needs had allegedly been rerouted, quietly, repeatedly, to support one man's solo fitness fantasy. There were whispers even back then, fans noticing that Kody's gym gains didn't quite match the financial strain showing up in the wives' homes. Meri had shuttered her bed and breakfast temporarily. Janelle was seen tightening her belt on air, and Christine? She was watching from the sidelines as resources drained into Robyn's home like a faucet left on overnight. But this wasn't just favoritism. This was a whole new category of betrayal.
But she's like, I saw where all the money was going. And how much money Kody took and how much money Robyn took was a lot more than you were taking.
Insiders close to production say that Christine didn't want to include this part in the book at first, that it felt too petty, even though it cost her hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars over time. But the more she wrote, the more she realized the pattern. Conditional love, conditional money. The same way she had to perform to get affection, she suspects now that the family's finances were just another system of reward and punishment, with Kody at the top of the pyramid, handing out perks to those who served his image. And what serves his image more than looking lean, tan, and camera-ready? The most stunning part? Christine allegedly claims that the trainer's payments continued even during filming hiatuses, when TLC wasn't cutting checks, which raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Where exactly was the money coming from then? If not from the show, and not from a business the family ran together, then was it coming from Christine's portion or Janelle's? Did someone cover that cost without even knowing it? And that's when the chapter takes a darker turn.
We didn't know, we never knew what the other wives were getting money-wise. We just understood what we had, but Janelle saw it all. And Janelle doesn't say much, and she's very tight-lipped.
Because once Christine saw one line item that didn't belong, she started seeing more. Like a thread pulled from a blanket, it all began to unravel. And according to her, that trainer's name wasn't even the most outrageous thing she found. Christine describes it like stumbling across a stain on a white rug. At first, it was faint, something you might miss if you weren't looking closely, but once it caught her eye, she couldn't unsee it. And when she started flipping through their old pandemic-era budget logs, that same trainer's name showed up again, and again, and again. Christine says she felt a pit form in her stomach because none of the wives had signed off on this, and no one had mentioned it at any of the family's monthly meetings. The entries were vague, labeled under general wellness or personal care, and Christine admits she initially assumed it was something for the kids, maybe therapy, maybe medical. But when the dollar amounts started climbing, 1 month, $200, the next, $800, then suddenly over $5,000, that's when the alarms really started blaring. Now here's where things get murkier. Christine doesn't publish screenshots in the preview copies, but she strongly implies she has them. She references one entry marked PHX Mind Body Consult, followed by a Venmo notation that didn't match any of the typical family expenses. And then she drops a name, just a first name, one that fans will recognize if they've followed the deleted vlogs and Robyn's old wellness forums. The name has since been scrubbed from most public-facing content, but Reddit sleuths had flagged it months ago. Christine, without saying it outright, seems to be confirming what the online community has suspected for a while. This trainer was not just pumping iron with Kody. He was allegedly cashing checks hand over fist, possibly at the family's collective expense.
I mean, we're talking about you being an athlete. Did you play baseball?
No.
Were you a football player?
Yes.
So it's like,
I was a wrestler.
So you never got the touchdown, but you got some pick.
Christine's writing style in this section is light but biting. She jokes that she always thought the family's biggest money leak was the shipping cost for Robyn's jewelry line, not an overpaid fitness guru with a flair for custom meal prep and spiritual stretching, but the tone turns somber when she reflects on how often she accepted not knowing the truth. I was trained to believe I didn't need to ask, she writes. That questioning meant I didn't trust, and not trusting meant I wasn't faithful. It's that sentence that sticks, because it shows just how deep the conditioning ran, how financial secrets weren't just tolerated, they were normalized, and allegedly Christine wasn't alone in her concern. She claims that during one particularly tense household meeting, a TLC production staffer, someone behind the scenes, not on camera, quietly pulled her aside and asked if she'd noticed anything odd about the discretionary budget categories. Christine didn't answer at the time. She didn't want to rock the boat, but the comment stayed with her.
Kody would just take out funds and I don't know what for.
And when she finally dug deeper, she started to wonder how much money had disappeared over the years without anyone truly knowing where it went. But it wasn't just about the trainer, because just when she thought she'd identified the leak, Christine alleges that something even bigger was hiding in plain sight. Christine doesn't accuse, she implies, and sometimes that's even more powerful. Because midway through her book, buried in a chapter that appears to be about personal growth and boundaries, she drops a curveball. She references what she calls a performance clause, tied to the show, something she didn't understand fully at the time, but now believes may have given Kody more access to the TLC funds than the rest of them realized.
You and I sit here in this moment with this truth we have. I couldn't find that with them anymore.
According to her, the clause was tied to his appearance, his availability for solo confessionals, and his so-called personal brand value. In short, the better he looked, the more camera time he booked, and the more camera time he booked, the more he got paid. Alone, Christine stopped short of calling it theft, but she doesn't deny feeling betrayed either. She writes that around the same time these trainer payments spiked, she began noticing changes. Kody was booking private hotel rooms for media prep, insisting he needed solo time to mentally rehearse for scenes. He was doing protein powder orders in bulk, meal prepping separately, and talking nonstop about building legacy muscle. She thought he was just being, well, Kody. But now, in hindsight, she wonders if the obsession with fitness wasn't just about health. It was about leverage. Because if he could make himself the star, the irreplaceable one, then maybe TLC would cut him deals the rest of them never even knew to ask for. And here's where the whisper becomes a roar. Christine suggests that these solo payments weren't small. In fact, she implies they were substantial, enough to support more than just a hobbyist gym habit. Insiders familiar with reality show contracts estimate that a figure like Kody, especially in the peak Sister Wives years, could have made tens of thousands of dollars in bonus appearance fees, possibly more if producers rewarded him for narrative consistency or storyline leadership. Two buzzwords. Christine name drops with a mix of amusement and frustration. And if he was using that money to fund a full-blown wellness lifestyle behind the scenes while the rest of the family was clipping coupons and choosing between water bills or Wi-Fi, well, that's not just favoritism, that's manipulation with a bank account. Christine doesn't say how she found out about the clause, but she does mention a conversation with a former TLC assistant who told her, off the record, that Kody had been asking for individual contracts as far back as season 8.
Not even Janelle?
No.
I mean, do you think you
She's
could
just not that intimate. I mean, emotionally.
I don't...
Allegedly, he argued that the wives were too inconsistent and that he was carrying the brand. And Christine, reading this in her own voice on the audiobook, lets the silence sit. You can hear the tension. You can feel the realization settling in, that it was never really their show. It was his. But the biggest question isn't whether he got paid more. It's whether he used that power to keep everyone else beneath him. And that's what Christine explores next, with one particularly troubling detail about who exactly this trainer really was. Christine never names him directly, not in the excerpt we've heard, but she gives just enough context to light up the fan forums like a Christmas tree. Tall, clean-cut, a penchant for tight polos and inspirational hashtags. She describes him as a mindset coach with a gym bag, someone who seemed to float in and out of Kody's world with no clear job title, but a very expensive invoice trail. According to Christine, the man first popped up casually, just a name dropped during dinner when Kody mentioned he'd found a new accountability partner. She thought it meant a buddy from the gym, someone to spot him. What she didn't expect was to hear the same name attached to recurring charges on their joint expense tracker, and later see him on set, chatting with a field producer like they were old friends. From there, things got stranger. Christine recalls seeing him in background shots, once during a taping day in Flagstaff, again outside a car rental kiosk in Scottsdale. Always hovering, never mic'd. At first, she thought he might be part of the crew. But then Robyn made a passing comment that caught Christine's ear. He's really helped Kody stay centered. Centered? Christine hadn't realized Kody was off-center. But looking back, that was the moment she started questioning who was coaching whom.
You're still young, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the lecture about projecting yourself 5 years in the future.
Online sleuths think they've found the guy. A fitness entrepreneur with ties to motivational speaking circuits, someone who briefly sold a total fatherhood reset course on YouTube before scrubbing his content and disappearing offline. His name has been linked, unverified of course, to multiple reality-adjacent figures. But the kicker? He allegedly once hosted a men's retreat promising to unlock masculine legacy through movement and sovereignty. Christine doesn't say it, but her tone makes it clear. The man wasn't just counting Kody's reps. He was, in her eyes, whispering in his ear. And that whisper may have come with a price tag. Christine implies that at least one wellness weekend in Arizona was booked under the guise of production prep, but Kody allegedly brought the trainer along and wrote off the costs through a personal development label. Meanwhile, Christine and the kids were sharing sandwiches and cutting back on back-to-school shopping. It's hard to feel like a family, she writes, when one person's needs are always framed as an investment and everyone else's are a burden. The other wives never seemed to question it, or maybe they did and stayed quiet. Christine admits that by then she had stopped asking altogether. She didn't want to be branded difficult. But now, with years of distance and clarity behind her, she sees that silence for what it was, complicity born from exhaustion, and she's done being quiet. But as troubling as this trainer's presence was, Christine hints there was something even more scandalous behind the curtain. A second paper trail, one not tied to physical fitness, but to ego. If you've ever scrolled through Kody Brown's Cameo page, you've probably caught on to the shtick. For $150 a pop, he offers motivational messages straight from the world of Charles Dickens, specifically Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes, that's Scrooge, the miserly old man who hoarded wealth, dodged compassion, and needed 3 ghosts just to find his humanity. The irony, according to Christine, Kody didn't adopt Scrooge as satire. He genuinely sees himself as a modern-day version, reborn, as he allegedly puts it, thanks to gym sessions and self-reflection. In one cameo, he even encourages fans to perform what he calls the 5-year mirror test. Look at your life, project yourself into the future, and ask if you like what you see. Christine can barely get through that chapter without a laugh. Because as she tells it, Kody had already mastered the art of looking in mirrors, literal ones. She writes about how the house they once shared had mirrors in nearly every room. She jokes that he didn't just check his reflection, he consulted it. He'd flex and whisper affirmations while we made sandwiches, she says, a detail that's somehow both hilarious and deeply sad. And while the wives were scrubbing floors or coordinating chaotic family schedules, Kody was booking cameos where he stood shirtless under filtered lighting, quoting Dickens, and pushing life advice wrapped in pseudo-wisdom. But this wasn't just about ego. Christine hints that the cameos and the trainer weren't separate indulgences, they were linked. That Kody's wellness journey, his motivational messaging, and his Dickens fixation all fed into a larger identity he was trying to sell to the public. And every protein shake, every staged shirtless selfie, every line from A Christmas Carol, they all cost money. The question Christine started asking herself, and the one she wants readers to ask too, is whose money? Because here's where things get murky again.
Well, all right. I have felt for years now that I do lead, but it's always consensus.
Christine implies that Kody was funneling family funds to support this personal rebrand. She doesn't have exact numbers, but she mentions unusual purchases, a $1,200 standing ring light, custom editing software billed under a consulting line item, a pair of limited edition sneakers that showed up as a mobility tool. These things didn't benefit the family. They benefited the man pitching Scrooge as a lifestyle guru while ignoring the real ghost haunting his past. And fans? They're not buying it. Comments exploded the moment Christine teased this connection on social media. One user wrote, Ebenezer would be appalled. Even he learned his lesson. Another asked, is Kody's next hustle going to be a Dickens-themed boot camp? It's funny, until it's not, because Christine ends that section with a chilling reminder. While Kody was preaching legacy to strangers online, his actual children were wondering if their school clothes budget would stretch far enough for fall. And just when you think this tale couldn't get more absurd, Christine peels back the curtain on how TLC itself may have turned a blind eye, if not quietly enabled it all from the start. Christine doesn't point fingers at the network, not directly, but she doesn't have to. In one of the most heavily underlined chapters, she refers to a quiet tolerance among certain TLC staffers whenever Kody's behavior became questionable. Christine writes that there were times when crew members exchanged looks or changed the subject entirely when expenses came up, especially those tied to Kody's solo brand building. It wasn't just the trainer or the lighting kits. It was hotel upgrades, meal stipends, late-night transportation charges, all billed under the production umbrella, but allegedly used for what she calls image management, not family filming. Now, this is where things start to feel a little corporate. Christine recalls hearing the term content asset protection tossed around in meetings, industry speak for keeping your most bankable star happy, even if it means bending the rules. She says she didn't understand it at first. "I thought we were all the asset," she says plainly in the audiobook with a trace of heartbreak. But as she started noticing who got priority in call times, wardrobe reimbursements, and editing approval, the hierarchy became crystal clear. Kody wasn't just the patriarch in front of the camera. Behind the scenes, he was being treated like a protected brand. Christine admits she kept quiet longer than she should have. "There's something about being on TV," she writes. "It makes you question what's normal. It makes you feel like raising your hand means ruining everything." But the moment she truly began to suspect TLC was aware of the financial imbalance was during season 16, when a segment about budgeting was mysteriously cut from the final edit. Christine claims the entire conversation was filmed, a tense kitchen table exchange where she and Janelle confronted Kody about rising grocery costs and missing receipts. But when the episode aired, it was replaced with footage of Robyn unpacking holiday ornaments. That edit, Christine says, told her everything. Not only was the network avoiding the money questions, it was protecting Kody from the consequences of them. Whether that protection was intentional or just a product of lazy oversight, she doesn't claim to know. But she raises the question boldly. How can a show claim to be real when the most revealing moments are left on the cutting room floor? And here's where the tension skyrockets. Christine says she later learned from a former producer that there had been a red flag raised internally. An email, allegedly suggesting someone look into whether personal expenses were being misclassified under production reimbursements. That email, according to Christine's source, vanished. 1 week it was a topic. The next, no one brought it up again. And if that's true, if even TLC knew something was off and looked the other way, then this isn't just about Kody. It's about a system that may have silently allowed it. And that's what Christine turns to next. The ripple effects of silence, and how a toxic financial structure nearly broke her spirit. At this point in the book, the money trail fades momentarily, and Christine pivots, not to dodge, not to soften, but because, as she says herself, the real cost wasn't dollars. It was dignity. She describes sitting at a worn-out kitchen table, notepad in hand, trying to make sense of household expenses she didn't remember agreeing to. Her voice shakes in the audio version when she says, "I felt like a guest in my own marriage, a roommate who didn't pay enough rent." It wasn't just the trainer invoices or the cameos or the unexplained charges tucked behind vague production codes. It was the fact that every time she asked a question, she got that look. The one Kody reserved for disobedient energy, as he allegedly once called it. Christine had spent years convincing herself that if she just worked harder, cooked more, smiled more, stayed silent more, he'd see her. Not just look at her, but see her. And maybe then she'd be allowed to ask about the money, about the missing groceries, about the upgraded hotel rooms. But deep down she knew. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to. Kody, she writes, didn't withhold affection in the heat of the moment. He weaponized it. She'd get praise only if she didn't question the budget. Attention only if she backed up Robyn's choices. Financial support only if she played along on camera. And when she didn't, Christine claims the consequences were swift and chilling. She shares one story where she tried to pitch a small family trip, just her and her kids, nothing fancy. And Kody allegedly responded with a budget breakdown that listed 3 reasons why it couldn't happen. None of them made sense. It wasn't about money, she says. It was about control. The message was clear. If she wanted joy, she had to earn it. If she wanted transparency, she had to pay for it in silence. This chapter of the book is heavy. There's no sugarcoating, but there's something else buried in there too. Grit. Christine doesn't present herself as a victim. She owns her mistakes. She acknowledges the ways she tolerated too much, how the desire to keep the peace often cost her peace of mind. But then she turns a corner. She recalls a late-night Zoom with her aunt, Kristen Decker, who told her plainly, "Real love never sends a bill, and it sure as hell doesn't hand you an invoice with strings attached." That line stuck, because Christine realized, maybe for the first time, that love in their world had always come with strings. And once she saw that, once she heard it in her bones, she couldn't unhear it. And just as her heart began to clear, Christine learned there may be legal implications to how far Kody's so-called brand building actually went. Christine never uses the word fraud, but she comes close. In a chapter titled Unequal Shares, she unpacks a growing suspicion that what looked like careless spending might have crossed into something more serious, especially once interstate finances and TLC payouts entered the picture. At one point, she describes discovering that certain expenses, allegedly fitness-related, self-promotion-related, or labeled retreat prep, had been reimbursed using business accounts meant for production. And here's the twist. Some of those expenses didn't occur in Utah, or even in Arizona. According to Christine, at least one took place in Nevada, and another, marked under media prep, was tied to a last-minute trip to California. Why does that matter? Because once money crosses state lines under misrepresented pretenses, it can trigger jurisdictional scrutiny, especially if it involves network money, taxable stipends, or mischaracterized deductions. Christine doesn't claim to be a legal expert, but she says someone close to the family, not named but implied to have financial expertise, quietly told her that Kody might want to review how he's categorizing his self-investments. And that's putting it mildly. Around this time in the book, the mood shifts. Christine starts talking less like a heartbroken ex-wife and more like a woman who's seen the playbook, decoded the symbols, and realized she was never supposed to see the script in the first place. She references shell charges and hobby expenses hidden in plain sight. She uses air quotes around words like consulting and personal development. It's clear she suspects, though never outright states, that Kody may have used the chaos of polygamy as a smokescreen. 4 wives, over a dozen kids, multiple states. Add in a camera crew and a storyline, and who's really keeping track of receipts? And if Christine's right, if even half of what she implies turns out to be true, then Kody Brown may have more than just family tension to answer for. Because once viewers start asking where the TLC money really went, someone higher up may start asking too. That fear, Christine says, was part of what finally snapped her out of silence. Not just for her own sake, but for her children. How do you teach them to be honest when the adults around them hide everything behind faith and charisma, she asks. And more hauntingly, what kind of legacy are they inheriting if everything they grew up believing was built on illusions? She doesn't want revenge. She doesn't want a lawsuit. What she wants, what she demands, is the truth. Even if it's messy, even if it burns down the whole fiction they lived in for over a decade. And that's why she says the next chapter almost didn't make it into the book. Because the number she reveals next, it stunned even her. Christine waited until nearly the end of her book to drop it, a figure so outrageous, so seemingly impossible, that she admits she reread the document 3 times before she believed it. And even then, she wasn't sure she was interpreting it correctly. But according to her, the number tied to Kody's wellness expenses, spanning fitness coaching, mindset retreats, dietary consulting, and personal development, was not in the thousands. It was not even in the tens of thousands. It allegedly exceeded $130,000 over the course of 3 years. She doesn't say this was all TLC money, she's careful about that, but she does make it clear that the source of those funds was never disclosed to the rest of the family. Not in full. Christine recalls asking about certain charges during a rare financial review and being brushed off with vague answers about business development and investments in the future of the brand. At the time, she assumed it was tied to merchandising or podcasting, or maybe something with Robyn's struggling jewelry venture. But now, looking at the full pattern in hindsight, she's convinced it was all about Kody, and here's the moment that hits hardest. Christine says she found the number printed in a quarterly report, one she was never supposed to see. She'd requested the paperwork to double-check her taxes after a freelance legal advisor warned her that shared assets could get messy during her separation. That's when she saw the name of the trainer again, and then again. But this time it wasn't one charge. It was a bundled invoice, coded under executive coaching, with totals that added up like a slot machine spinning wildly out of control. She nearly left it out of the book, not because it wasn't relevant, but because she feared it would distract from the emotional story she was trying to tell. But in the end, she kept it in. Because to Christine, the emotional story is the financial story. You can't separate the betrayal of love from the betrayal of trust, she says in the audio version. One came with empty promises, the other came with a receipt. And what makes it all even more outrageous, that trainer, according to Christine, has since moved on. She says he now markets himself as a celebrity energy alignment specialist and charges upward of $2,000 for a 1-hour Zoom. The man who once hovered quietly behind the scenes of Sister Wives now flaunts connections to high-value male leaders and promotes spiritual strength through physical control. Christine doesn't name him, but she does mutter, almost under her breath, "I wonder how many other families paid that price." And then she goes quiet. In the audio version, there's a pause. Not a dramatic one, a human one. And when she speaks again, her voice is soft. "I kept the final number to myself for a long time, but now, you deserve to know." And just when you think the revelations are over, Christine signs off with a warning for TLC and a final promise for readers still on the fence about whether they should listen. Christine doesn't end her story with fireworks, no shouting, no finger pointing, just a slow, deliberate unraveling of the lies she once helped hold together. And in her final chapter, she stops speaking to Kody. She stops speaking to the trainer. She stops even speaking to herself. Instead, she addresses TLC, not by name, but by power. If you profit from a system built on silence, she writes, then eventually, that silence becomes your scandal. There's a quiet force in her words. She doesn't call for cancellation. She doesn't demand that the show be pulled or the network punished. What she asks for is accountability, real, transparent reckoning with the role producers and executives may have played in propping up an illusion that cost real women real years of their lives. You filmed us crying, she writes. You knew what the tears were for. That sentence lands like a punch. She hints, without confirming, that she was warned not to include certain names in the book, not because they were dangerous, but because they were inconvenient. People in production who may have helped code the budgets, greenlight the reimbursements, or choose which storylines aired and which ones disappeared without a trace. And though she doesn't publish those names, she leaves behind enough breadcrumbs that insiders and longtime viewers will almost certainly know where to look. Then, in a move that's both vulnerable and defiant, Christine signs off by sharing what she calls her last untold. During the final weeks of her marriage, when she'd already mentally left the relationship but hadn't packed her bags, she says Kody gave her a book. Not a love letter, not a shared memory, a book. It was his personal copy of A Christmas Carol, underlined, dog-eared, with his name scribbled in the inside flap. He told her to read it and picture her future. But I'd already seen it, she says, and it didn't include him. The irony? The book that once guided Kody's legacy mindset became the very tool Christine used to understand what she didn't want to become. A person living for a story that was never hers. She closes with a promise. Not to the audience, not even to her children, but to herself. No more false futures, no more buried budgets. I see everything clearly now. And after 30 seasons of emotional fog, that kind of clarity is priceless. So now we turn to you, because let's be honest, this saga is far from over. If Christine's numbers are accurate, and if TLC really did let this happen under their watch, what should happen next? Should the network answer for years of silent complicity? And do you think this book will finally push more former cast members to break their own silence? Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because this story, it's not just a chapter, it's a reckoning. The next video on your screen is waiting, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.